Hello friends, welcome to the course on Institutional Management and Administrative Procedures. Friends, today we are going to deal with an important process of any institution, that is institutional communication. Communication is the lifeline of any institution. Without effective communication, no institution can survive in today's scenario. It is the root of success of any organization or institution. In the presentation today, friends, we shall discuss the importance of communication in an institution, different types of communication and its applicability in different situations, identify different models of communication in an institution. Let's first understand what exactly is communication. Communication is a process of passing of information and understanding from one person to another. It is basically a bridge of meaning between people by virtue of which a person can cross the range of misunderstanding that separates two persons. In other words, communication is the transmission of and interchange of facts, ideas, feelings, or course of action. Process of communication involves mainly three important elements. First is the sender, who is delivering the content of the information by encoding it. Then the medium or media through which the information is passed. And the third part is the receiver, who decodes the information, understands the information, and responds to give the feedback. So these are the three important elements of any communication process. There are basically four types of communications in any institution. These are divided into based on parties, based on formality, based on media, and other possible communication processes. First, understand based on parties. These parties can be internal or external. Accordingly, the communication is internal communication or external communication. This communication internal can be verbal communication, horizontal communication, and on the other hand, this can be also downward communication, upward communication, cross communication, or also called diagonal communication. Based on the formality, this can be divided into two parts: formal communication, which is between the organizing head and the faculty and other stakeholders through a formal system, formal introduction, and informal communication which takes place throughout the institution, throughout the day, throughout the night, every moment. This is informal communication. Then based on the media, this can be in the form of written communication, oral or verbal communication, or non-verbal communication. Then there can be other forms of communication also: mass communication, personal communication between two parties, interpersonal communication. All these are the different types of communication which take place in any institution. Let's understand each one of them one by one. Before understanding them one by one, let's also understand the communication based on media. Based on media, communication is verbal communication and non-verbal communication. Under verbal communication, there is oral communication in terms of speaking and listening, and written communication in terms of writing and reading. Under the non-verbal communication, we are having different types of communication which can be expressed in the form of facial expression, gestures, body language, proximity, touch, personal appearance, silence. These are ways through which we communicate. In this non-verbal communication, means is the gestures, facial expression, and other means which lead to effectiveness of communication, and it is generally said non-verbal communication is sometimes much more effective than verbal communication because it expresses the real meaning of communication and the people understand it from your gestures, how effectively you are talking with them or communicating with them. Then let's understand means of internal and external communication. Internal communication can be through notices, reports, memos, face-to-face. These can be through also emails, team briefings, presentations. External communication is through formal letters, fax, direct mails, advertisements, videos, websites, pamphlets, brochures. So basically, you can understand there are two major components of communication in any institution. These are internal communication within the institution and external communication with the outside stakeholders. Both are very important. After understanding the concept of communication, let's understand what is effective communication. Because unless the communication is effective, the meaning of communication will never reach the corners it should reach, and it will never be having an impact on the system which is required to be done by any effective communication. Effective communication, in other words, is an important tool for the smooth and efficient working of any institution, as it reduces the chances of misunderstandings, conflicts, errors, repetitiveness, and time spent on decoding by subordinates. Unless the communication is effective, the meaning which is expected to be conveyed to the subordinates cannot be conveyed. That's the reason effective communication has to take place in any organization. Some of the features which can be important in the effective communication are the choice of words or its content, precision and crispness of content, clarity and sensibility of content, use of meaningful words, phrases for encoding, loud and clear pitch of speaker, capturing listeners' attention regularly, keeping cross-checks for feedback, making eye contact with listener to make him feel at ease, correct pronunciation of words. These are some of the basic elements of any effective communication. These elements make the communication effective. So, for any communicator, it is very important that he should understand what type of elements he should take care of, what type of considerations he should take care of while communicating with the subordinates, with the seniors, with the clients, with the customers. So, these effective communication elements help a communicator in making his communication, making his message, making his information effective to the receiver. There are basically 7 elements of principles of effective communication, or in other words, these are called 7 C's of effective communication. These are clarity. Clarity means the simple and concrete words, short and simple sentences, which help the message to be conveyed in the real sense. For this, we generally follow the principle of KISS, keep it short and straight. Then the second element is concreteness of the information. It should be supported by well-researched data and figures. The language should be interpreted univocally, no ambiguity, no confusion. So, whatever information you want to convey, it should be concrete based on the facts and figures, which should be well researched. Then third C is conciseness. Be in teaching or passing of information in the form of instruction. It is effective only if there is consistency in the storyline, which is well supported by facts and figures. Content of communication should be very specific to the target, and it should lead to generation of expected outcome. Unless we are very sure of the outcome, whether it has been achieved or not, no communication can be effective. So, outcome should be taken care of while giving the message or the information to the receiver. Then comes the correctness. Another C, important C, is correctness. Be it any language used for the communication, it has to be grammatically correct. It adds to trustworthiness of the sender and seriousness of the recipient. Then comes the fifth C, that is consideration. The content to be passed on to the target should be need-based, related with their age and level of education, related to their previous knowledge, and also relate to them. The content of communication should reflect the benefit the recipient is going to gain out of it. The sixth C is completeness. Completeness of message or information happens when it is based on facts, full of explanations, subdivided properly to reach the recipient's perception. Content must be encoded to cover all W's. These W's are: why are we dealing with the topic, who will be benefited, where to get the literature, where can you make use of concept, etc., etc., etc. Then comes the sixth component, courtesy. The approach of the speaker should be friendly and courteous. Use of respectful words make them feel comfortable and better listeners. After understanding the 7 C's of communication, 2 more C's have come into picture, which are very important in today's scenario for the effectiveness of communication in any institution. These are specifically in the today's scenario, these are cropped up. These are creativity and credibility. Creativity is the use of new words, phrases, expressions, cited with appropriate examples. These make the text more effective and clearly understandable. It's just like putting an old wine into new bottle to sell it better, but it requires more inputs, lateral thinking on the part of encoder, and a conscious effort. On the other hand, credibility of the content is based on your tone. The clearer it is, the better your message is conveyed. The confident tone of a teacher or administrator can be trusted. So, adding these two more C's make the total C's 9. This is all I wanted to convey about the communication effectiveness in this presentation. Friends, summarizing, it is generally said communication is the lifeline for the success of any institution. It provides the basis for all directions from the academic managers to the lower staff and feedback and suggestions from lower staff to top management. Institutions use different models for enhancing the effectiveness of communication. Clarity, concreteness, conciseness, correctness, consideration, completeness, and courtesy are the 7 C's of effective communication in an institution. By now, I am sure you must have understood the importance of communication in an institution. You must have also understood the process of communication and the importance of 7 C's in making any communication effective in the life of an institution. Thank you very much.